Hello, so let's continue our series with now adding a text below the logo which contains the name of the university, and we will add the buttons for sign in and sign up. So next step, let's add a text. So this text should be below the logo. Now let's first add a text element. We can add it wherever we want here inside the relative layout. So let's add a text view with the width, wrap content, the height, wrap content, and the text itself. Let's make it Arab Open University. Now let's give it a white color. Let's give it a size. Let's say 36 dp or more. Let's give it 52. That's too much. Let's give it 40 dp. That's also too much. $30 dp is good. Let's give it some style. Text style. Let's say it is bold. Let's keep it bold. And let's give it an ID. So ID equal ID. Let's say its name ID. Now we want to make this text appear below the logo itself. So text layout below, ID, logo ID. Okay, we also want to make it centered horizontally, so center horizontal equal true. Let's also give it some margin from the logo, so margin top equal, let's say 50 dp. As we see here, we have some issue between the text and the username. So what we want to do also, we made the linear layout containing the username and password. We positioned it to be below the logo ID. What we actually want to do is to position it below the text ID itself. So let's go back to this linear layout, to this linear layout, and make it below, instead of logo ID, make it below name ID. Now the elements are positioned below each other. So the Arab Open University is below the logo, and all this is below the text. Great. Now let's make the text a little bit closer to the logo. So we go to the text view that we added, and instead of adding a margin of 50 dp, let's make it around 30 dp. That's better. That is better. Great. Let's make it 25 dp. Great. Now one more thing, I'd like actually also to make the logo a little bit smaller, so that would be better. Okay, great. Now the next step, we want to add the buttons. So what we want to do is, let's create also a linear layout. We can put this layout wherever we want. So there's a difference here between a linear layout and a relative layout in terms of where to put the text inside the XML. So if we are talking in the relative layout, so we can put any element anywhere inside the XML, and it doesn't matter because it will be positioned relatively to the layout. So relatively to the layout, to the parent, and to other elements. So that's why it doesn't matter where we put the text. For example, we can put the text here, or we can put it here, or we can put it wherever we want. It would be the same. But inside a linear layout, it matters where we put our elements. So let's say we took this here and put it above. So not now, as we see the line here, the white line here above, it is above the username. So it matters in the linear layout where we put the elements inside the XML file. But inside a relative layout, it doesn't matter, because as we said, we will use the attributes to define where the layout is positioned according to other elements and according to its parent. So let's continue now. We want to add one more thing. Let's add it here, which is the layout containing the buttons. So let's make it a linear layout, and we will also have some session in the future describing every layout in details. So let's not worry too much about differences between linear and relative layout for the time being, and constraint layout. Let's just take these as general guidelines and use them to build our first demo, our first page. So let's add a linear layout here, and the width should be wrap content, the height is wrap content, and this layout itself is a horizontal layout. So orientation is horizontal. Why? Because the buttons will be positioned next to each other. So inside this layout, what we need to do is add two buttons. So button 1 would have the width, let's say, of wrap content, and height wrap content, and let's give a text to this button. So the text would be sign in. Let's also give it an ID. Sign in PTN. That looks good. Let's also add the other button. We can copy paste and change some attributes, or we can create another button here, which is the sign up button. So button width is wrap content and height is wrap content, and text would be sign up with a space, and the ID is sign up PTN. Or let's make the IDs have the word ID in order to be similar to the other naming that we are using with the other elements. Great. Now we have these two elements. What we want to do is as we said, these are in a linear layout, so we want to put this linear layout itself below the username and password. So we need to position it below the credentials linear layout. That is great. Now let's make it centered horizontally. So center horizontally, go through, and let's give it some padding or margin from top. Let's give it around 50 dp.